Okay, so this video is more novelty than anything, but I do think it's a pretty interesting idea. We're talking about the Arizona Coyotes and we're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and no, this time we're not highlighting the idea of Matthews going over from Toronto to Arizona. That video was already made, and by the way, it's at 200,000 views. It is the second highest most viewed video on this YouTube channel, which is insane to me. Do I even thank you? Like, is that what you want to hear from me? Oh, thank you for watching my video clickbaiting about your superstar franchise generational player leaving your team. Thank you so much. No, I don't know if I want to do that, but either way, I just thought it was cool to go out there and mention that. We're talking about the Coyotes, we're talking about the Maple Leafs, and we're talking about the Seattle Kraken, as well as the entire drafting process that the Arizona Coyotes have had at their third overall picks. The reason we're bringing this up is because, firstly, of that same documentary that we talked about a few days ago. We made the video about Shane Wright's reaction to dropping the 4th overall at the 2022 draft, and in that video we said, hey, there was a documentary the NHL made, it's 46-ish minutes long, and it goes over pretty much the first few picks of the draft, and it does so in a pretty cool way. It's a documentary-style film, and there's a highlight package of Slafkovsky, Cooley, and Nemec all getting drafted. They're super happy, and you could see for Shane Wright, the guy who was supposed to be first overall in the eyes of many scouts, you see him dropping the 4th, and you can see his reaction at every pick. It is not a fun video for Shane Wright, but in that same documentary, there were some other things that I thought were interesting to talk about. Firstly, after Shane Wright eventually did get selected 4th overall, you had yourselves a moment when he was decked out in Seattle Kraken gear, where he got a text from a guy whose name you might be familiar with, Mitch Marner. You could see in the video, he kind of chuckles to himself and he's like smiling, looking at his phone saying, hey, Mitch Marner just texted me, bro. And it's cool to see that actually go down. We had ourselves a quote from Mitch Marner earlier yesterday that pretty much cemented why that happened and what was actually said. Here's Mitch talking about what he said to Shane Wright after the draft. Everyone could see a little frustration. I just wanted to text him and say, hey, 4th overall is a nice pick. Nothing wrong with going 4th. It's an exciting opportunity for him to prove himself. Mitch Marner also had the chance to watch Shane Wright train at Hill Academy before going to Kingston. He's a great kid. He's an extreme worker, takes a lot of pride in his craft. I saw a couple of negative reports about him, but I think they're all lies. Now, this is really interesting. Not just because, oh, it's Mitch Marner calling a guy and saying, oh, it's cool, he went 4th, fine. But there is a pretty interesting link between these two players when it comes to being 4th overall talents, especially when you talk about the teams that passed over them in their respective drafts. You see, Mitch Marner went 4th overall in 2015, in a draft that saw Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel take over the 1 and 2 spots. Now, the entire season, it was McDavid, Eichel, Mick Eichel, whatever you want to call it, and these two were going to be number 1 and number 2. From there, you had yourselves a bigger argument opening up as to who the 3rd overall pick would be. You had several names thrown into that conversation. Hey, there is this big defenseman from Boston College and Noah Hanifin. You have this smaller, skilled, shifty guy in Mitch Marner. You have Ivan Provorov and Zach Werenski, other defensemen that are on the board who can go 3rd overall. And the team that had the choice of making that 3rd overall pick was none other than the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes, with the 3rd overall pick in the 2015 draft, selected Dylan Strome, a guy whom we've talked about a ton over the past few days because he was a 3rd overall player that was supposed to be an absolutely first-line caliber lock, and he was playing with McDavid, and he was so good as a big, skilled center. But, long story short, Dylan Strome at 3 was probably one of the worst picks that the Coyotes could have made, with hindsight included, because you take a look at what happened with Dylan Strome in his career, he has definitely not fulfilled the potential that he was set out to having back in that time frame. Strome went 3rd overall, and Mitch Marner, who was also an OHL talent that season, went 4th. The Maple Leafs saw the skill, the Maple Leafs saw the pizzazz, they saw the shifty offensive creativity that Mitch Marner had as a member of the London Knights, and they said, hey, we like you enough, we're going to take you 4th, and you're going to be a Maple Leaf playing for your hometown team. Now, it's kind of funny because Strome and Marner were both 1 and 2 in OHL scoring that season. Connor McDavid was only 3rd overall because he played 47 games. He was 1st in points per game by a long shot, but when it came to Strome and Marner and what they did, I mean, they were kind of neck and neck. You could say that Strome was more valuable because he had more size, he had more projectability, quote-unquote. You could say Marner was better because he had a much more exemplified offensive creativity package of skill and puck play. But at the end of the day, people were kind of like, okay, Strome went higher than Marner. That's an understandable conclusion that you could go out there and assess. Let's just see where things go from here. Strome, as we said, did not really do all too well as his years went on. Mitch Marner eventually did. Marner maxed out getting 97 points in 72 games this season, and I mean, if you do the math over 82, the guy was on pace for over 100 points. Let's do 97, divvy 72, multiplied out by 82. He was on pace for 110 points over a full season, which is phenomenal. Very, very good right there. And so, for Mitch Marner to go out there and say, hey, I was drafted 4th overall, let's console the other 4th overall pick from this year's draft, Shane Wright, and say that being drafted 4th is okay. It's kind of funny because Shane Wright was also passed over at the 3rd overall spot by the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes had Logan Cooley, 3rd overall in 2022. They had Dylan Strome, 3rd overall in 2015. I get it. Some people that are watching this video that are younger, especially like if you're 12 or 11 or whatever, like you're watching this video and you're like, oh, okay, cool. But like 2015 happened and that was 7 years ago. I was like 4 when that occurred. And it's like not really a moment that holds too much sentimental value to me. But for me personally, I was 15 in 2015. And so remembering everything that happened in that draft season and remembering the hype for Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel and Strome and Marner and everybody, and revisiting that same idea today with the lens of, hey, the Arizona Coyotes did it again. They passed up on one guy and they took another guy. It's just a little different here because Mitch Marner was not really supposed to go 1st overall like Shane Wright was. Ever since Shane Wright was like 14, 15 years old, people had been shoving that idea down his throat. Hey, you're going to go 1st overall. You're going to be 1st overall. You're going to be number 1. You're going to be Connor McDavid 2.0 because you beat his 15-year-old season in the OHL. There was not that same level of stakes that applies to Mitch Marner in his draft year and draft situation, but I just thought it was really interesting to highlight how everything works out. In fact, if I had to try to make a comparative analysis of what Arizona did, if you're talking about Cooley versus Wright, I would say that Logan Cooley plays a lot more like Mitch Marner than Shane Wright does. Marner and Cooley are both very offensively gifted. They're both super dynamic with the way they move across the ice with the puck especially. They're both deceptive and they're skilled, and I don't necessarily see the same qualities out of Shane Wright other than his very cerebral approach to the game. I do believe that Shane Wright is a lot more of a goal scorer than Marner was when Marner was in the OHL playing with Tkachuk and Christian Dvorak and all those guys, but at the end of the day, there still is a pretty interesting storyline that coagulates here when you talk about how Mitch Marner reached out to Wright and said, yeah, no, it's okay that you were drafted 4th because I was drafted 4th and I did pretty all right. So talk to me in the comments your thoughts about Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Arizona, for your sake, I hope Logan Cooley works out. For Seattle, I hope Shane Wright works out. We know Dylan Strome did not really work out all too well for Arizona. I mean, you traded him away to Chicago for Nick Schmaltz and a whole bunch of other stuff, so hopefully Schmaltzy is able to go out there and fix himself up. But at the end of the day, there are some of these picks that Arizona has made specifically where it's like, oh, if they just took Marner over Strome, where would they be now? In 2015, if they just took Quinn Hughes over Barrett Hayton, where would they be now? There were a lot of what-ifs, and it's kind of funny because I did like Barrett Hayton in 2018, not 5th overall though. I thought he was definitely not good enough to be in that position. 2019, they took Victor Soderstrom, whom I'm a very big fan of. 2020, who the heck did they take in 2020? I'm thinking. They were in the playoffs that year, right? So it wasn't really a super high slam dunk pick. Oh my goodness, it was Mitch Miller, right? They didn't have a 1st that year. That is so bad. And then 2021, you had Dylan Guenther. Okay, he's been pretty good, so I'll give him a pass. But talk in the comments your thoughts about the Arizona Coyotes passing up on both Marner and Wright at 3rd overall, Marner reaching out to Wright because of it and giving him the okay, saying that it's going to be fine. Talk to me in the comments your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj 99. And bye.